Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. It's been a long week of Ultimate Prog, and for that reason, I wasn't even sure I'd do a weekly Q&A this week. I think I even said in last week's that I might not, but I'm going to, but it's all going to be lightning round, so it's going to be shorter. We all know it's not going to be short. And I'm going to just do my best with the energy that I have before I eat, pass out, and get ready to do it all again tomorrow. Before that, of course, many of you have seen the video regarding my mother and the fundraiser, and it was, everyone blew it out the water, whether it be Twitch, YouTube. It caught on so much more than I thought. I didn't think that that goal was possible. I was like, it's just not going to happen, so don't expect it, Mom. And then it was like 4 hours. It wasn't even like 2 lockouts of Ultimate, and then we hit it. And I was just, I was blown away. I mean, what else can you really say about it? And with that, you know, it's going to lift a lot of burden off of me. And of course, it's going to lift a huge burden off my mother, who doesn't want to be borrowing money from me in the first place, but has no choice. But now she's, the house was fairly close to being paid off, so that's now going to be done. Property taxes will be all taken care of, and bills are set. I don't even know for how long. Like, the idea was to get to 50,000, and then I could, it would help bring down the costs of the house, which meant I could continue to support it without putting myself in any sort of financial risk, because obviously I don't live at home. I live 3,000 miles away in California. So it's tough affording 2 households, one in California and one in New Jersey, but managed over the years. And it's just, yeah, so you don't even understand. My mother's been trying to manually thank every single person who has donated and left a message. And she's been telling me to pass messages along to please give her some time because her hands don't work as well as they used to. So thank you to everyone who contributed. But at this point, it's so far over. I thought I was going to be including it in videos and content, and then it just seemed like doing that past the point of thanking people would be greedy. So no moving the goalpost, no trying to push it any further than it is. Obviously, the GoFundMe stays up, but it's now other than this thank you, and maybe a separate video, and maybe some other thank you videos that I'll do in the future. It's all taken care of. So this is the longest segment of the weekly Q&A because it means a lot to me. So thank you so much to anyone who contributed. And if you couldn't contribute, don't feel bad, because your well wishes were just as well met as any of the donations that helped essentially my mother save the house that she raised the family in. So with that, I'm going to do a cut in the video. Thank you to, by the way, our Patreon sponsors as well, and our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni have gone above and beyond. So thank you to them. Now I'm going to do a cut in the video, and I'm just going to lightning round as many questions as I can. Okay, because it's a lightning round, I don't put them on the screen because then you just watch me scroll through and it's kind of ugly. So this one is, Lolly Ho, hope things are going well. How do you feel about the status of PvE? I mean, it's the same as it's always there's always jobs that could, you wish would get buffed or changed or nerfed in some capacity. Most of the time just buffs, but PvE has been good. I mean, our first raid tier is really solid. This current ultimate tier is really solid. I don't have any complaints. And now that PvP is doing good as well, minus the issues that it has with things like win traders or cheaters or whatnot, that's still a vast improvement over what it was before. So I'm really happy with the state of most everything in 14 right now, more than I think I ever have been in the past. This one was Bard question. When is a good time to pick up a second combat job? 14 is not a game that has any sort of agency. Well, yeah, you should probably work on the story before trying out another job. You also should just play it how you want. You shouldn't think about it too heavily. So if you're just like, I kind of want to try something else, go ahead. There's nothing to really work against you there. You'll just be doing content that you've already done. And it's also content you've done fairly recently as well. So maybe it'll be mildly less interesting, but yeah, whenever you want. That's not that big a deal. Then this one, well met, Mr. Happy. I was wondering, if you weren't a full-time streamer, what career do you think you'd end up doing instead? So I was in college for game design. However, I went to an IT college with a major in game design. If you are looking to do game design, do not do that. Please, if you want an IT degree, go for an IT degree. If you want a game design degree, go to a college that actually is specialized in game design. Because while I picked up things and I learned things, and I'm actually pretty content with the knowledge that came out, is a lot of self-teaching in information technologies and video game, when a video game major in an information technologies college, because it's not in its core, it's not designed to be really a full-fledged video game learning experience or development experience. You really just pick up the tools that would allow you to then pursue video game design. And I think that's the route I would have went, if not just kind of a standard IT desk job. That's what I was doing before I was a full-time streamer. And so I can't imagine my life would have gone one of any other ways, but I would have always been pining to do something like this. And I think as the years went on, I would have pined for it more and more until I tried harder, but I might not have succeeded if I had tried any later than I did. I don't know, maybe I would have. But the only thing I wish I could have done is tried it earlier because, you know, I mean, who knows how my life would be different, but either way, it was always kind of talking about video games is the thing I loved to do, and I didn't think that that was going to be enough, so I had to get into actually making them, and then when I realized that it was okay, it was it was fine. Let's see. Somebody was asking a question about them adding old content into the MSQ after it's already in the game, like the Crystal Tower. Do you think they will consider adding the Shadow of Mach into the MSQ? I think 24-mans are viable to be added to the MSQ at this point. They've already done it once before. They've set a precedence for it. But I think they need to do a better job than just kind of stopping you and being like, hey, go do this side quest or you can't continue the MSQ. I think it needs to be streamlined to some capacity to make it more obvious to new players that that is a route they have to take, but not when they are like at the end of what they were currently working on. So yeah, I think at this point, it's only things like the void quests, for example. Some people have asked if those would pop up. I don't think they'd have to completely restructure access to those because they would not want to make that part of the MSQ with how it is currently accessed now, to do all the Shadowbringers role quest, followed up by the quest after that, followed, you know, you also have to do the Warring Triad. It's just, there's too many components that are all over the place, so they'd have to rework that. What is the best, most efficient way to target in PvP? Honestly, macros that target enemies are probably the best if you don't mind having 5 extra keybinds. You can actually use an enemy target indicator. It would be open, it would be less than sign, E, and then the number, and then close it with the greater than sign. That's probably the absolute best way, but you then have to get used to this whole new targeting scheme that is pressing a button to target the correct player. And I think we all know that going from how you've been doing it all this time to a brand new way, it would just have a warm-up period. I actually manually click a lot of people, and I don't have that many issues with the targeting. If anything, me overpressing tab is more of a problem than tab not working. So I think it depends, but if you really want to kill someone, you either have to click them or you have to make one of those macros, especially if you're a controller player. The macros are probably a great improvement over the traditional, you know, left to right targeting system. There's one here, question about parsing and variance. Some polls I'm sub 95 on P1S, and then there's sometimes I have like identical to 99s, but I'm best. Yeah, so anything over 95 is generally considered crit variance. Really, anything over 98 is 100% crit variance. You can definitely orange without needing a 100% like best crit rate style, but that's where all the variance takes place. I always say if you're over like 80, honestly, if you're over 75, you're performing in the upper percentile. You should be pleased with that performance, but at that point, there is still room for improvement. It means that you've worked hard, you've pushed yourself to a point that's really good. You just have that little bit extra you can push before it becomes crit variance. But once you're over 95, I wouldn't sweat it too much. I'd say at that point you are performing nearly perfect, and it's small little things that are not indicative of how skilled you are, or there's such like small human errors that you would never knock yourself for them happening. So that's how I would, but I would say, yeah, it's largely crit variance at this point. Is there any way to improve the quality of players? No. The players need to improve themselves to improve the quality of players. I think a lot of it is because it's kind of easy to climb to Crystal with just enough time and enough dedication that there's not necessarily an onus to actually improving to getting to the higher ranks. That does mean that more people want to get in because they see the possibility of actually making progress. And that's really good. And the idea is that over time, those same players naturally by doing it more will get better at it. Now that doesn't necessarily equate one-to-one, but I think that that is an acceptable enough expectation that we really won't see the fruits of in a first season of Feast, a first season of Crystalline Conflict after all those seasons of Feast, and will take time for it to actually develop. I think the quality of Crystal gameplay will increase with patches as people who are less interested in PvP don't play future seasons, but people who didn't try previous seasons get into the new seasons. But at the top, there's going to be the people who are just playing every season. So I think it will get better over time. Then we have one right here, ultimate related question, but not for Dragon Song's Reprise. Looking for a casual to mid-core group for Uwu. Wondering what your suggested resources would be. So there are ultimate discords. I don't remember all of them, but UPR is the primal related one. All of them have all the pug strats for their data centers. They have even ways to get pickup groups in the discords themselves. Whatever resources those discords are offering are the resources I would recommend, because those are also the discords in charge of the actual pugging for those individual data centers. So look up whatever your data center is, find the discord for it, and then use whatever resources are listed in their resource channels. That's going to be the most relevant to you without a shadow of a doubt. Somebody here saying they donated to support my mom and the kindness others had done. Thank you. Again, it was very much not expected the way that it went. What class would you like to see added in the next expansion that fits scouting gear? See, I have a hard time answering questions like this because you can make a job fit scouting gear. You can make Blue Mage, technically. If you look at Final Fantasy XI's Blue Mage, the Far Eastern aesthetic with, the turbans and the face mask and everything, you could argue, you could swing that as being scouting gear. But then there's like things that are kind of like ninjas, like somebody, obviously some people like to think of like Shinobi or, Thief eventually being introduced, even though they said they weren't going to do it. That's why Rogue is called Rogue and it's not called the Thieves Guild, etc., etc. And then they could just make something up. I mean, that's the most important thing. They could make a job. They could say it's based on Locke from Final Fantasy VI and call it Treasure Hunter. They can do whatever they want. So I don't have a wish list for this, is I guess what I'm kind of going to. With new adventure cards, you think Square Enix will likely expand upon this with new features? Yeah, it's going to be really popular. So they're going to look to see if they can do more with it. More features, and think about more places it's applied to. Maybe when you zone into a dungeon during that opening screen, when it's kind of showing you the start of the dungeon, don't be surprised if people's portraits start showing up there. And other content as well outside of PvP. So I would look to see them do that, and I think they'll do that first. They've even mentioned doing that before they look at more features for the plate itself. Like you've mentioned, a biography section or a portrait slideshow, or maybe even a moving portrait, something other than the effects, but more like actually doing a full animation. Those are possible in the future, but I think they'll focus on making it apply in more places first. And I'd also like to see them fix the friends list, because I feel like it could have more involvement with the friends list, but the friends list feature is not that great. So they would have to go some ways to make that better. Make a new updated guide for Ultima's Bane. So my old guide is still largely accurate. There are some things that could use some updating, and I'll give you a solid maybe on this one. Right now I'm focused on Ultimate, but you're not the first person to ask that, so you get a solid maybe for the moment. If you could choose your PvP team of 5, what job would they be? So I haven't played PvP since the changes. The patch Ultimate came out. Reaper are Heroes a lot better now. They got exactly what we were saying they should get. Their limit break gauge should be shorter. They should be less reliant on snowballing, but it could be a trait of their job. And they nailed that, it seems. So their presence has gone up a lot. So they would probably be on the team. Ninja is still an absolute menace. Red Mage an absolute menace. And then Warrior and White Mage still an absolute menace. I think you could trade Warrior out for a different tank and probably still do okay. But I think they probably look more or something like that now. But it's still hard to argue against, Samurai being able to turn an entire fight around, or Dragoon being able to gank a whole bunch of people. Really easy burst windows to access, even if it's not necessarily as broken or frustratingly overpowered as some of the other melees. Its presence is overpowered, I think is the best way to put it, especially with Wormwind Dive, or Wormwind Thrust. That's what it's called. But something along those lines, I think. Somebody else asking if they would make the Shadows of Mach mandatory. Maybe. I did answer that already. So that is a big thing. Few people reminding me that I accidentally named 2 of them in a row 390. That's because I copy-paste the title, and I was kind of in a rush that day. So my apologies. Dying Artifact Armor for Stormblood. Do I still need to do Eureka or to get the Onimos to die? I think so. Yeah, Onimos is very quick. You can do Onimos in a few hours, though. So I wouldn't shy away from doing that. Let's see. What would you change about Polymorph if you could change anything? When you take damage, it breaks. That number one thing. Exactly like it works in World of Warcraft. So if somebody hits you while you're polymorphed, you instantly break the polymorph. That way it would be used more as a denial tool or a method of interrupting people's means of recovery, but not outright shutting them out for several seconds. That would make it fair, I think, more than anything else. And it would make it used in a more healthy way, I feel. hold on. Let me do this. There we go. I was trying to fix OBS. I had a setting open that was just annoying me on the side. Any monk tips for PvP? They really need some more adjustments. Right now, the only big thing is to really try to stun into a buffed enlightenment into your ultimate and assassinate one person on the enemy team. By doing this, you turn a fight from a 5v5 to a 5v4. And by doing that, it allows the monk to allow the rest of your team to snowball, or at least that's the hope. A big thing also, if you can get an execute on one person while hitting the entire enemy team with a buffed enlightenment. So if you jump into 4 people and they don't focus you and you can actually hit a full team with enlightenment, your impact on the fight is enormous. The problem is doing that and getting out alive, or even actually finishing your burst. So that may work in the lower ranks, but it becomes infinitely more difficult to do that in the higher ranks. Fortunately, with the buff to pressure point, fortunately with some of the other buffs that they got, they actually can have an impact just by using buffed enlightenments into groups on the enemy team. It's similar to how Wyrmwind Thrust has an impact from just throwing it into a pack of enemies that are standing on a crystal, for example. The only difference is this also knocks back, so there's a chance that if you use it incorrectly, you're actually going to mess up your team's follow-up, or you're going to give the enemy a chance to get away. So you still have to be careful about those things. And there's a few different combos that you can do to make it work a little bit more concisely, I suppose. Let's see. Savage design philosophy changed to Savage only phase 4 and 4 to 8, double boss, very final form. P4 seems like they're going back to double bosses in each tier. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, there's only ever been one Savage boss that was door boss into super long actual final boss, and that's X-Death and Neo X-Death. Every single one of the Savage bosses since then has been 2 bosses of somewhat similar fight length. Kefka and God Kefka, I think Kefka's like 7 minutes and God Kefka's like 9.5. Whereas I think then you have Omega, I think it's like 8 minutes for phase 1 and then like 10:30 for the second phase. And then you go into Eden, and Eden is actually just one super long, like 12 something minute phase. Shiva's like 14 minutes and like 12 seconds or something like that with the cutscene in between. And then with Oracle of Darkness, you have basically 2 fights that are almost the same length. I think they're like 30 seconds different. I think one's like 8:30 and one's 9. I don't even remember which one's which. And this kind of is similar. This one's like, I don't know. I don't remember the exact timings of this one. I think this one's like 7.5 and 8 or something of that capacity. I don't remember the exact times for P4S. But they said that they're just going to kind of do whatever they want to do with those fights, and they're not going to lean into one or the other, because then if they lean into one or the other, then they just end up repeating it and it gets kind of boring. And that's what happened with Stormblood. It was like, oh, it's so predictable. Here's the door boss. Here's the final boss. So that doesn't mean that like P8 and P12 are going to be the exact same way. But it is something they will use when they deem they want to use it. This whole boss checkpoint boss kind of style. So just whatever happens. We just have to take it. Let's see. I want to go into high-end Party Finder for the first time. What are some preparations I can do? Buy food, meld your gear, buy pots. Research ahead of time if you're not doing blind prog. If you're doing fresh prog and the team is okay with you not looking at videos ahead of time, cool. But otherwise, try to do the research ahead of time. I think that's a very, very important thing to do. So just don't expect other people to do work that you aren't willing to do. And don't just say, I don't want to do that, and then join groups that kind of expect you. You have to go with what the party leader and what the party and the players in that party are doing to win, and you want to kind of just match them. So just bear that in mind depending on what kind of prog you want to do. It very, very much changes how you want to prepare for that. And then I have another question right after that. Same thing. I'm not sure where to start looking into trying harder content without the safety net of my friends. Honestly, the toughest thing is the answer is you really just need to accept that strangers are sometimes not going to be nice. And that most of the time, honestly, people, when prog's not going well, a lot of the times people just kind of stay quiet and maybe leave randomly. Unless so, sit there and berate one individual while learning. My recommendation, start with extreme content, because people, learn and mess up and learn and recover and learn and mess up, and just a constant pattern with extremes. But it's so kind of forgiving that that's not that bad. So that's a good place to start. Number 2, then go into the first encounter in the last Savage tier and just try to work through it. Try to learn it. Just sit there and go. You don't need the safety net of your friend. I would recommend getting some crafted gear, any tome gear that you can get, even upgrade the crafted gear to 590, you know, if you have some spare tomestones lying around, because then you're vastly overgeared for everything, and you can focus not on your gear, not on anything like that. You can focus on just the encounters that you're trying to learn and dedicate your energies for that. I'd also recommend to this and the other question prior that you practice, make sure you understand how to do your rotation, and don't just sit at a dummy and do your rotation. Almost kind of visualize as if you were being attacked by something, and try to like imagine how you would move around an enemy given a certain attack was taking place. It really helps to visualize and just kind of imagine scenarios in which case you have to play differently other than just hitting a target. I don't recommend any add-ons. I don't think people need them. I think a lot of people lean on them too heavily, and they don't actually learn how to play the game as opposed to using them as an assistance tool. You don't want to have to rely on these things. You don't want to have to lean on them. You want to be able to kind of build your own raid muscles, I suppose is the best way to put it. But honestly, my biggest piece of advice to this and the previous question, don't think so much. Just go into the party finder, start with extremes, work up to savage, and don't think so much, because it's just a video game at the end of the day, and it's just content. There's nothing too major, even if some people make it seem very, very serious. Let's see. Player who finished 3.0 MSQ, does my Dragoon GCD get more busy? Yes. It gets much busier. Do not ever macro your abilities down. Don't do that. You don't need an MMO mouse, but don't macro your abilities down either. They will not work the way you want them to. So, it's just practice. Don't worry about it too much. Just as you go, practice. Possible to pug P4S without clearing P3? I mean, it is, and you never need to beat fights sequentially. Only the party leader needs to have access to the encounter. Yeah, you can do it if you really want to. You just bear in mind you will be loot locked out of P3S until a patch comes that removes the loot lock altogether. If you decide to enter P4S, you'll be loot locked for P3S for the rest of the week. So, feel like that's a fair warning to actually have. Now, I want to try PvP. Not sure what to expect. Don't just jump in. Don't think about it too much. You know, you'll learn as you go. You can ask questions as you go. Just pick a job, read your abilities, read everything on the PvP guide list, go to the Wolves Den, maybe hit a dummy a few times to see how they interact with one another. And you're good. Just don't think so much. When you want to try something new, just jump in and try it. It's a video game. Fortunately, it's not anything majorly physical or threatening of any kind. It's simple. You just want to jump in because you're curious and have fun. Just do a little bit of basic reading ahead of time. Understand what your abilities do. You should be okay. No idea which strat to do for which mechanics. Yeah, this depends on the data center. I can't tell you what strats people use. I haven't even done Party Finder for Savage in quite some months. I would just Google like Party Finder strats for X data center. Just Google it, and whatever results pop up, I would just take that. Let's see, hotbars toggle mix. Okay, what do you think of the shit show housing problems? I think a lot of people just need to, the irony of this, touch grass. Because they had a bug, they fixed the bug, the people who were supposed to get the houses still got their houses, and the only thing they needed to figure out at that point was how to collect the money from the people who did win the houses so that they weren't just given houses for free. And they said they would do that in the future. So it's going to be on maintenance until May 16th, if I recall, and that's it. There's nothing more than that. Now, if it had completely botched the system and everyone lost everything and all the data was completely corrupted, that would have been a shit show. But hey, our two servers weren't communicating, but we have all the winners selected, so we just need to push it through. It's a pretty good solution at the end of the day. What do you think about me filling a large plot with 400 cakes? I mean, if you earn the house, I mean, go ahead. That's it. Let's see, you made a comment about all or nothing for third-party software. I agree. I personally find it disgusting people using such software to blatantly cheat. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, people have cheated for years, but there is a fine line between people using tools for assistance and people using tools to do things they're not supposed to. And the problem is, I would be okay with them going so full that none of those tools exist, but there's a subset of people that actually do suffer because of it. And are not just like people like, oh, I can't parse anymore. And people would still find a way to parse. Like, let's be real. Even if they banned it, people would still find a way to do it. It's technically bannable now. Doesn't stop anyone from doing it. But realistically, like I joked around a lot about that. They probably wouldn't want to install anything on the PCs because it's not so much about them worrying about the person's data. It's they're worried about people hacking the anti-cheat and then accessing people's desktops directly. That's one of their other major primary concerns. They just don't want to install any third-party software that isn't pertinent to the game onto people's PCs, because they're worried people will see that as a security breach, and that there's also like laws and stuff against that in some countries, so it actually creates a bit of a problem for them. So it's like, it is what it is. People want to use CACBot. You need CACBot to clear visually impaired. Something like CACBot helps me get the same in-game information, animation, cast bar, so on. Normal sighted people can. My question is, what are your thoughts on using third-party software to compensate disability? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Remember when I said a small subset of people that need these things and are not abusing them and are not leaning on them or not relying on them, but are actually using them with which to prop up their experience? That's the small subset of people that suffer the most, because these are the kind of places where these kind of tools are useful. Then you have people who have no disabilities, no problems whatsoever, and you go into a fight and you call out a mechanic and they literally don't know what to do unless CACBot tells them what to do, or a third-party add-on tells them what to do. They have no sense of it, so it has nothing to do with that. So it's like, yeah, I don't like that there are people that act like that, who are just so almost lazy. But then there's people who you can't tell the difference because you don't know those people. You don't know who's actually on the other side of the character. And it just, it's such a sensitive topic. It's so easy to flip it on a dime. So if anything, they would just need better visual aids in game. I would always prefer us to have first party things that assist people with disabilities or any sort of affliction that makes playing the game more difficult. I'd rather they just be first party. So now I'm not saying CACBot should be first party, but they should consider more than just the colorblind for visually impaired. I know they do have the audio cues to help with people, but again, I feel like there's always more they can do. And I think like they always know there's more they can do for accessibility. So that's what I'd prefer to see. I'd prefer to see instead us get first party quality of life and additions that help with disabilities. So that's where we go with that. What are you at today? I don't know what that means. Do you have a favorite zone music in 11? Honestly, not zone music, but the boss music for COP. That one's pretty up there for me. The Archangel boss music also pretty up there for me. And actually, a lot of the newer music, pretty good. Let's see. A lot of people talking about the voiceover stuff. Look forward to PvP. Because SC doesn't bother crack down on PvP plugins. Wait, I look forward to PvP dying because SC doesn't bother crack down on PvP plugins. I don't think it'll die. I think enough people are interested in it that they'll work through kind of some of the hardships for it. But that's about it. This person, the playing in Japanese rant at around 29 minutes made my freaking day. I'm so sick of people that don't speak Japanese talking about how good Japanese VAs are. Speak fluent Japanese and prefer it, sure, but if you don't, shut the hell up, because I'm a multilingual person. The English VA for folks like Alice and Emmett knocks it out of the park. See, I like this other person's reply. I just like not knowing if it's good or bad. I see that's the realness right there. Somebody who's like, I honestly just listen to it in Japanese because I don't know if it's bad or not. But if it's in English, I'll know immediately if it's bad. That's good. I like that. Oh man. I think that might be the last question, actually. Final Fantasy XI clearly had good talent choice systems, so your statement's a little exaggerated. No, it didn't. You picked what was best, and that was it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, for example, on a Black Mage, on average, Thunder and Ice were the most common bonuses that you would take for your merit 2s, for your merits in general, because those were the most commonly used spells. And then you sometimes had that Gigabrain moment where somebody had fire as their buffed one, and you'd go up against that like one boss where you actually burst with fire and be like, oh yeah, I have merits in there. And you know what everyone else would say? Like, oh, that's weird. I don't care. I'm just gonna not put merits into that for this one fight. So it was like, you don't even need them. And there also weren't talents. There were buffs to skills you already had, which I guess kind of work like talents, the merit system. But you most of the time didn't have a choice. You had to take what was the community best, or you were griefing. There's maybe one bit of flexibility, and even then it was normally a pretty minuscule thing. So no, it's always an illusion of choice. You either have what is best in most situations, or you have something that is only good in very set situations. But 99% of your talents in any game that gives you a talent choice, you're going to be going with what is considered a community standard. Just because you occasionally gigabrain that 1% moment where you swap a talent doesn't mean the whole system works. It means it probably should have just been that way in the first place, because there's no way people are going to take it for that 1% chance that it's actually going to do something pretty useful. Anyway, with that, it looks like I'm done with all the questions. So we actually kept this, about 30 minutes. That was about what I was hoping this video would be. So thank you everyone for putting up with my lightning round version and for putting up with the tired sounding me. I am going to go just do a little bit and yeah, and then I will be good, and then I'll be back in the Ultimate very next day. I was going to make another update video on maybe just the phase that we got to after this, but I think I'm just going to chill. It's just so exhausting. I still got to make a thank you video for the thing from my mother, kind of along the veins of what we said at the start here. But I want to break down again what the reason for the initial 50,000 goal was, what that would have achieved, and what this now achieves in its place, which I've already touched upon in this video, but I can go into much more detail about it if I actually get into it a little bit later. Anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you, well, when I'm done with Ultimate, I guess. Anyway, thanks. And until next time, take care.